kept this secret for 40 years. Miss Pinkston is your biological daughter. But now say the DNA will prove your case.
For 40 years, one man carried a secret so heavy, it haunted every breath he took. A secret that could destroy a family or finally set one free. He says he fathered a daughter decades ago, a child born into another man's marriage. Now, 40 years later, he stands in court, ready to prove it with DNA. But what happens when truth comes too late? For most of her life, Tonia Pinkston believed her father was the man who raised her, Mr. Gus Pinkston, the man who taught her to fix things, to work hard, and to never leave her family's side. He was her world, her protector, her example, her dad. But everything changed when she turned 16. That's when her mother told her something she could never forget. It started on an ordinary afternoon. Her mom took her to visit a friend, a man named Kenny Fegan. Tonia remembered walking into the house, confused by her mother's strange nervousness. Her mom called her into the dining room and said softly, "I want you to meet somebody." As the two adults started talking, her mother suddenly turned and said words that shattered her world. "By the way, this is your father." Tonia froze. She laughed at first. She thought it was a joke. Her real father, Gus Pinkston, was at work. He had been there every day of her life. "What are you talking about?" she said. "My dad's at work." But her mother was serious. Tears filled her eyes, and then everyone started crying, her mom, Kenny, even Tonia herself. She later said, "That was the worst day of my life. My whole world turned upside down." At 16, she was forced to carry a secret that wasn't hers to bear, one that would haunt her for decades. For years, the truth stayed buried. Her mother had begged her to keep quiet, to never tell the man who raised her. So she didn't. Not once. From age 16 to 27, until the day her father passed away, Tonia never spoke of it. She said later, "I lived with that guilt every day. My dad died not knowing. He went to his grave believing I was his biological daughter." But while Tonia lived with silence, Kenny Fegan lived with longing. He said he met Tonia's mother while they both worked at a manufacturing plant decades ago. They were coworkers, and eventually they became something more. He admitted they had an affair that lasted about 6 months. "She was married," he confessed, "and what we did was wrong, but I loved her, and when she told me she was pregnant, she told me I was the father." They agreed to keep it secret. The child, Tonia, would be born into her mother's marriage. Her mother's husband would raise her as his own. Kenny agreed, even though it broke his heart. He said, "I knew that baby was mine, but I had to stay quiet. She was married and I didn't want to ruin her life." So for decades, he watched from a distance. He visited sometimes, always as a family friend. He'd stop by the Pinkston home, chat politely, smile, and pretend. To everyone else, he was just a friend of the family. But to him, he was secretly watching his daughter grow up. He said, "Every time I saw her, it hurt. I wanted to tell her, but I couldn't. The secret had to stay hidden." When Tonia turned 16, her mother finally told her the truth, but it wasn't to free her conscience. It was because of something else. Her mother had heard that Tonia might be dating one of Kenny's family members. Panicked, she decided to reveal the secret before it turned into a disaster. "She told me only because she thought I was dating my cousin," Tonia said. "But it wasn't me, it was my sister." That one misunderstanding exposed everything. When Tonia was asked how she felt in that moment, her voice broke. She said, "I didn't believe it. I couldn't. I just kept thinking, my dad's at work. How could this man be my father? She said she cried all night. And even years later, just talking about it brought tears to her eyes. She said she felt like her entire childhood, every memory with her father, was suddenly a lie. Meanwhile, Kenny said he carried his own pain in silence. He said he never asked Tonya to keep the secret, but her mother insisted. I didn't want her to go through that, he said softly, but her mom said we had to. She didn't want anyone to know. He admitted that, even though it hurt, he honored that promise. He said, I loved her enough to keep her mother's secret, even if it meant never hearing her call me Dad. When asked if she ever saw Kenny as a father, Tonya said no. I had one dad, she said firmly, and that was Mr. Pinkston, the man who raised me, the man who was there for me. She said that even after learning the truth, she could never bring herself to call Kenny her father. It didn't feel right, she said. My dad died, and no one else could ever take his place. When her father passed away, the pain of the secret deepened. Tonya said, he died without ever knowing, and I regret that. If they had the courage to tell me, why didn't they have the courage to tell him? Maybe it would have been better if everyone had just faced it then. Her mother's decision had spared her reputation, but it had left her daughter with decades of emotional confusion. Kenny said he often wondered if Gus, the man who raised Tonya, had ever suspected the truth. He said, in my heart, I always thought he knew something. I just had that feeling, because I loved that girl so much. Every time I saw her, I saw myself. He admitted he met Gus a few times, came by the house while Gus was alive, pretending to be just another family friend. I'd sit there in the living room, he said, watching him talk to her, and I'd think, that should have been me. He smiled sadly, but I never said a word. As the years went on, Tonya started her own family. She had children of her own, and even they grew up never knowing the full story. But one day, everything nearly came out again, this time through her kids. Tonya said that after her father died, Kenny came to visit her at her mother's house. Her children were there too. And without asking her first, Kenny told them something that changed everything. He said, I'm your grandfather. Tonya said her kids were confused and upset. They didn't know him, she said, and for him to say that without talking to me first, it destroyed them. They didn't understand. Kenny said he thought she had already told them. He said, I figured she had accepted it. I thought it was okay to tell them. But it was. That moment only deepened the divide between them. Years passed. The secret stayed buried again, until the day Kenny decided he couldn't take it anymore. He said, I've carried this for 40 years. I lost my son, my only boy, and I realized if she really is my daughter, she's all I have left. I need to know before I die. And so, he brought the case to paternity court. When the judge asked Tonya's sister, Melissa, to testify, the room fell silent. Melissa said she hated being there. This should have been left alone, she said. If you kept a secret for 43 years, you should have kept it forever. Her voice shook as she added, my dad was a good man. My mom was a good woman. This just feels like disrespect. She admitted she had overheard things when she was younger, whispers among adults. She said she once heard her mother mention that Kenny might be Tonya's real father. I pretended I didn't hear it, she said, because I didn't want it to be true. Now, decades later, the entire family knew. And for the first time, the truth was about to be revealed. When the judge opened the DNA results, the entire courtroom held its breath. In the case of Fegan versus Pinkston, when it comes to 43-year-old Tonya Pinkston. Tonya looked down, trembling. Kenny whispered, I already know. In my heart, I know she's mine. The judge continued reading slowly. Mr. Fegan, you are not the father. The sound that followed was heartbreaking. Kenny gasped, covering his face. Tonya broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. She said, I can't believe this. After all these years, all that guilt, all that pain for nothing. Kenny whispered through tears, I really thought she was mine. He looked at Tonya and said softly, but I still love you. The judge nodded and said, after 40 years of confusion, at least now you both have the truth. The courtroom was still heavy from the previous case, a 40-year secret finally buried in truth. But as one family's pain faded, another walked in carrying a brand new one. This time, the story was about Ms. Johnson and her 26-year-old son, Dion, a young man who grew up never knowing who his real father was. He said he had lived his entire life hearing whispers, rumors, and half-truths, but never once a clear answer. Now, standing before the judge, he was ready to find out once and for all. Dion spoke first. He said he loved his mother, but could never understand why she refused to tell him the truth about his father. He said every time I asked, she'd change the subject or start crying, but I'm grown now. I deserve to know. He turned toward her and said, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to heal. The courtroom fell silent. Ms. Johnson sat still, her eyes downcast. You could see the years of pain on her face. She said softly, I didn't tell him because I didn't know for sure. There were 2 men around that time, and one of them was my cousin's husband. The courtroom gasped. She wiped her eyes. I was young, foolish, and lonely. It was one of the biggest mistakes of my life, but it happened. Dion froze. He stared at her, his voice shaking. You're telling me one of the men who might be my father was married to your cousin? She nodded silently. He took a deep breath, trying to process what he just heard. So you're saying my dad could have been a family member? She said not blood-related. He was married into the family, but yes, he was my cousin's husband. Then came the alleged father, Mr. Milford, a man in his 50s who walked in with a calm but heavy demeanor. He said he'd heard the rumors for years but had chosen to stay silent until now. He admitted that he and Ms. Johnson had been together once briefly, when he was still married to her cousin. He said it was one time. I'm not proud of it. I was drinking, my marriage was already falling apart, and I made a mistake. He said he never thought it would come back decades later, until he saw Dion. The judge asked him if he had ever suspected the boy could be his son. He nodded. I did, he said. The first time I saw him, I felt it. He looked like my father. Same eyes, same walk, but I couldn't say anything. I didn't want to destroy 2 families. Dion's mother turned toward him, tears in her eyes. You had the chance to say something, she said. You could have stepped up. He shook his head. And what would I have said? Hey, I might be your dad, but I was married to your cousin. Nobody would have believed me. Dion sat quietly, listening. Then he said, all these years I've been walking around not knowing who I am, and you both let me grow up like that. You both lied to me. His mother tried to explain. I didn't want to ruin the family, she said. Your grandmother begged me to keep it quiet. She said if anyone found out, we'd be outcasts. Dion looked down. So you protected everyone but me. Mr. Milford tried to defend himself. I'm not a bad man, he said softly. I made a bad choice. I was trying to do the right thing even if it meant living with guilt. Dion turned toward him, his voice trembling. You weren't trying to do the right thing. You were trying to protect your image. You left me to grow up without a father. His words echoed through the room. Then the judge asked Dion's cousin to testify, the woman who had once been married to Mr. Milford. She entered the courtroom visibly angry. She said, when I found out what they did, I wanted to disappear. My own cousin with my husband. That broke me. She said she never told her children the full truth. They think he left because of money issues. I never told them it was because of this. Then she turned toward Ms. Johnson. I forgave you once, she said, but I'll never forget. The tension was unbearable. Generations of betrayal had come full circle in that one courtroom. But the biggest question still hung in the air. Was Mr. Milford really Dion's father? Dion said, no matter what the paper says, I just want to know the truth. I've lived in the dark long enough. The judge nodded and opened the DNA envelope. Everyone held their breath. In the case of Johnson versus Milford, when it comes to 26-year-old Dion Johnson, the pause was long, too long. Mr. Milford, you are not the father. Gasps filled the room. Dion closed his eyes and exhaled. His mother broke down in tears. The judge waited for the noise to die down before continuing. However, another man has been identified by Ms. Johnson as a possible father, a man who is no longer living. The court fell silent again. Dion looked at his mother in confusion. Who? She whispered a name. It was someone Dion had never heard before, a man from her past, someone who had moved away decades ago. He said, you mean to tell me I came all the way here, went through all this pain, and my real father's dead? She nodded, sobbing, yes, I'm so sorry. The judge spoke gently. Dion, the truth may not have given you the answer you wanted, but it has given you closure. You now know who you are and who you're not. Dion nodded slowly. He said, for the first time in my life, I don't have to wonder anymore. He looked at Mr. Milford and said, you may not be my father, but I forgive you. You were man enough to show up. Then he turned to his mother. And I forgive you too, because holding on to anger won't fix anything. She broke down crying again. Thank you, she whispered. As they left the courtroom, the tension began to fade, replaced by something softer. Dion said he planned to visit his late father's hometown, to meet any family that might still be there. He said, I might not have grown up with him, but I want to know where I came from. I want to meet the people who knew him. Ms. Johnson smiled faintly through her tears. That's all I ever wanted for you, to know where you belong. A few months later, Dion sent a letter to Paternity Court. He wrote, I finally met my dad's side of the family. They told me stories about him, showed me old pictures, and when I looked at his face, I saw mine. I may not have known him in life, but I know him now through them. Thank you for helping me find peace. The truth had done what lies never could. It set them free. But the show wasn't over. Because just when everyone thought they had heard it all, the next case would reveal something even more shocking. A man accused of fathering a child not by a stranger, but by his best friend's wife. A betrayal so deep it would tear apart not just one friendship, but an entire family. Some betrayals come from strangers. Some come from lovers. But the worst ones, the ones that never heal, come from people you once called family. This final story is about Mr. Blake and Mr. Harris, two men who grew up together, shared everything, and trusted each other completely. Until one child changed everything. Mr. Blake and Mr. Harris weren't just friends, They were brothers in all but blood. They met in high school, served in the same neighborhood, worked the same jobs, and were even best men at each other's weddings. But one mistake, one quiet moment of weakness, would end decades of friendship in the most devastating way imaginable. It started when Mr. Harris's marriage began to fall apart. His wife, Angela, said they were drifting apart, barely speaking, living like roommates. She said he worked long hours, was distant, and often left her feeling alone. "I didn't plan on it," she said quietly. "But one night Blake came by to check on me. We talked for hours. I was crying. He hugged me and it just happened." That one night became the night she conceived her daughter, Maya. When Maya was born, everyone thought she looked just like Mr. Harris. He was proud, smiling from ear to ear, holding her in the hospital like she was the light of his life. He said, "I didn't think twice. That was my baby. I loved her from the second she opened her eyes." For years, he raised her with pride, teaching her to ride a bike, showing her how to pray before bed, calling her daddy's little girl. But everything changed after one drunken confession. It was at a backyard barbecue years later. Everyone was laughing, drinking, celebrating another birthday. And that's when Blake, his best friend, said something that stopped the laughter cold. He slurred his words, but spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Man, you know I love Maya like she's mine because maybe she is." The crowd went silent. Angela's face turned pale. And Harris, the man who had loved that child like his own, felt his world collapse. He said later, "At first I thought he was joking, but then I looked at Angela and I knew. She didn't say a word, she didn't deny it, she just froze." That night turned into weeks of arguments, silence, and suspicion. Angela admitted that she and Blake had been together once, only once, but swore it was before she got pregnant. But for Harris, the trust was gone. He said, "I could forgive her for cheating, maybe, but not for lying about a child." So years later, they found themselves in paternity court, with the truth finally on the line. Angela sat trembling as the case began. She said softly, "I know what I did was wrong. I hurt two men who didn't deserve it, but I swear I truly believed Maya was my husband's child. I wasn't trying to replace him." Her voice broke. "I just wanted to keep my family together." Mr. Harris didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Then he spoke. "I loved her, I loved Maya, but now I can't sleep. Every time I look at her, I wonder if I'm raising another man's child." Then came Blake. He walked into court quietly, guilt written all over his face. He said, "I'm not proud of what happened. I broke the one friendship that mattered most to me." He admitted the affair was real. "Yes," he said, "we were together once. It was wrong. I hated myself afterward. But when Maya was born, something inside me felt different. I can't explain it. I just felt like she was mine." The judge asked him why he never said anything sooner. He said, "Because I didn't want to destroy their marriage. I thought keeping quiet was the right thing, but I was wrong. Keeping quiet only destroyed us all." Then he turned toward his old friend. "Harris," he said softly, "if I could take it back, I would. I never meant to betray you like that." Harris's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't answer. The courtroom was silent as the DNA results were brought in. The judge opened the envelope slowly. You could feel the weight of years of friendship, loyalty, and heartbreak hanging in the air. In the case of Harris versus Blake, when it comes to 6-year-old Maya Harris, everyone leaned forward. "Mr. Harris, you are not the father." Angela broke down instantly, sobbing uncontrollably. Blake buried his face in his hands. Harris sat motionless, his entire world collapsing in a single sentence. The judge continued reading. "Mr. Blake, you are the father." The silence after that was deafening. A friendship of 25 years, gone in a heartbeat. Harris finally stood up, tears streaming down his face. He looked at Blake and said quietly, "You didn't just take my wife. You took my child, the one person I loved more than anyone in this world." Blake stood too, his voice shaking. "I didn't take her, I just didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." But there was no comfort in those words. Angela turned to Harris, begging. "I'm sorry," she cried. "Please don't hate me. I never meant for this to happen. You were the best husband, the best father. Please don't walk away from her. She still needs you." He turned to her slowly. "I'll always love that little girl," he said, "but I can't stay. Every time I look at you, I'll see him." He walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Afterward, the judge spoke softly to Blake. "You've been given the truth. What you do now defines the kind of father and man you'll be." Blake nodded through tears. "I'll be there for her," he said. "I'll never let her wonder who her father is." Months later, the show received an update from Angela. As she wrote, "Life hasn't been easy. I lost my husband, my best friend, and almost lost my mind. But the DNA gave me something I didn't expect: honesty. Blake is in Maya's life now, and she's adjusting. She's too young to understand what happened, but one day I'll tell her the truth." As for Harris, he moved to another state. "We haven't spoken, but I hope one day he forgives me." A year later, Paternity Court aired a reunion episode. To everyone's surprise, both men showed up. They hadn't spoken since that painful day. But Harris said he came not for Angela, not for Blake, but for Maya. He said, "I promised her I'd be there when she needed me, and I don't break promises, even if she's not my blood." Maya ran into his arms as soon as she saw him. And in that single moment, all the anger faded. Blake watched quietly from across the stage. Then he walked up and extended his hand. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I needed to thank you for being a father to her when I was." Harris hesitated for a long moment, then shook his hand. He said, "You broke me, but she deserves two men who love her, not two men who hate each other." The audience stood and applauded. Not because the pain was gone, but because the healing had finally begun. Angela later said, "When the truth came out, I thought it would destroy everything. But what I've learned is truth doesn't destroy. Lies do. Truth just hurts until it heals." She said she's raising Maya with both men now, one as her biological father, and the other as the man who raised her since birth. She said maybe God didn't give her one father, maybe he gave her two. Years later, a letter arrived from Maya herself, now a teenager. As she wrote, "When I found out what happened, I was angry, but now I see that love isn't about DNA, it's about who shows up. I'm lucky because both of my dads did." And that's what Paternity Court is all about. Not drama, not revenge, but the one thing every person deserves: the truth. Because when the lies are gone, healing can begin. And no matter how painful the truth may be, it's always better than living in doubt.